Welcome back to D&D Beyond. And you know her, you love her from Daredevil, from True Blood, and now Truest Blood, from the great
Yay.
Relics and Rarities, and most recently a competitor on Champions of the Realm. Please welcome Deborah Ann Woll to the stream. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
You are one of my very favorite people to talk about Dungeons and Dragons with, and you
Thank you.
also run an incredible game of Dungeons and Dragons. So that is what we are going to talk about today. We are going to get some tips on DMing. We're going to talk
Ooh.
puzzles and props, and a little bit about why maybe everybody should try it. So please, if you have some questions on these subjects for Deborah, please put them in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. How long now? Because we've had you on the
Okay.
channel, before I got here a
Yes.
couple of times before.
Yes. A couple of times.
And I think at that time you had already been DMing for several years, and it's now been what, like a decade?
I think I started when I was 25. I started playing. Maybe a year or two after that, I started dungeon mastering. So yeah, I just had a birthday, 37. So yeah, about 10 years dungeon mastering, 12 years playing.
Happy recent
Thank you.
birthday! What would you say in the time that you have been playing
Yeah.
has changed for you as a dungeon master?
Ooh. Oh boy. Um, I think just confidence, just straight up doing it more and more, becoming more and more confident. Having those, in the beginning, I planned a lot. And I'm still a planner. That's never going to totally go away. But I've had those moments in games since then where the players make a choice and go in a direction that you did not plan for. And I find that they also are just as wonderful, that like the faith in yourself that you can improvise your way through a strong storytelling moment. It really has to be experienced to be believed, especially for me, because I will always underestimate myself. So to have that moment happen and go, oh wow, I actually made up that whole encounter on the spot and it went okay. In fact, it was really fun. You kind of have to be thrown in the deep end and survive it to then trust that you can handle it when it happens. So that's probably the biggest adjustment.
Well, that's wonderful because that was actually going to be one of my questions. As someone so
Yeah.
good and meticulously like laying out these wonderful situations, I say
Yeah.
meticulous for the sheer seat of our pants rules light of the world.
Yes.
It's very impressive. But I um I was curious what.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna back burner that next one
Okay.
because I'm excited to get into
Okay.
it. But
Yeah.
um, what's the best part of being a dungeon master?
The best part of being a dungeon master. So for me, it's one is that live collaborative storytelling moment bit. I came from live theater. That was the first bit of acting I ever did. It was what made me fall in love with it. It's what I am striving to find my way back towards. And part of the thrill of live theater is that, audience in the palm of your hand, that you can feel their energy and they're with you in this present moment. And that doesn't quite happen on a film set. Film set is sort of satisfying and fulfilling in a very different way. But on stage, that's part of the allure of that. And what's interesting though is that in most stage theater, the audience is still a passive participant. They still sit back in their seats and they might cry or they might laugh. They might, get surprised, but they're not creating with you, and so I they're just sort of they're present, but there's a crackle to D&D when you are telling a story and it directly affects something that your audience is engaged with, and because they are more than an audience, a D&D team is an equal part of that storytelling process, and so there are moments when I often equate it to, like, it's like sports and storytelling come together because we were waiting on, like, one role to see if they could, like, heal this, person that they had rescued, and everyone's like, and all I said was like, "Her eyes flutter," and everyone was like, "Yeah!" And they jumped out of their chairs, and they were so excited, and they were cheering, and, like, the best live performance on stage I've ever given, no one went, "Yeah!" You know, like that. So there's a permission because you are involved in the storytelling as a player to engage at that level, and that to me is single-handedly the reason I love this game and why I try to get everyone I know to give it a shot.
What is a time in a game that something just didn't work out the way that you planned, and
Mm,
how did you adjust to it?
interesting. So, I try as I'm building games and running things as a dungeon master, I try to allow for solutions to come from anywhere, right? I want you to be able to solve it if your character is a brainy character through the puzzle, if your character's a um, strong person by knocking the thing down. Like I want you to be able to attack the problem in any way possible. So I try not to be too precious. Like if people decide not to do my puzzle, I'm like, great, I can use it later, right? Like you didn't solve it, so I just need to redress it, and I have a puzzle for later, and you think I came up with 2 puzzles, but I only
Okay,
came
that's
up with
genius.
right? So it's actually really wonderful when they when they solve the problem without using my puzzle. Um, so I don't know. I don't know I don't know that I actually think of it as anything going wrong, you know? It just goes different, and that's okay. And a lot of times, especially as I'm playtesting material, I love that because now if I wanna write it down and publish it or I wanna run it again, I can actually weave into the story those options. So, in many ways, when players go off track or, like, find their own way to solve things, that's, like, good for me because I get to steal it and pretend that I was that brilliant in the beginning.
Was there a learning curve for sort of over time, like you alluded earlier to kind of you
Mhm.
have to discover by living through it that actually it turned
Right,
out fine when you improvised.
right.
But was there anything stand out about that?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially for other GMs coming into it who might feel like, "Oh, I wouldn't be a good dungeon master because I don't have the confidence or I don't do voices or I don't," these kinds of things. I don't do very good voices, but I'm a silly person, so I just lean in to being silly, like, I do silly voices instead of good voices you know, um, or like I know I'm a crafty person. I love props. I like making things. So again, I can lean into that. I like puzzles. So I lean into that. So, rather than feeling like you have to do it like someone else does it or you have to do it like the books do it. That's even the player's guide and the DMG, they always say, this is a guide. Like this is just the baseline mechanics. Like you dress this up however you want it and you tell the story. And in the end, if you don't like this rule differently, like so that's part of what I think is really special about the literally the D&D publication is that they are so
Mm,
open to just inspiring you to create something of your own.
I do
So
think
yeah,
I
that's a
love that
little
line there.
bit.
The rules
Yeah.
don't run the game, you do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you do.
Needs.
And
Mhm.
there's a number of times where we'll come to a moment where someone wants to do something because I always want players to play from their imaginations, not from their sheet. So I kind of want them to go, "Oh, I want to distract them by like making an illusion." And I'm like, "Oh, do you have any spells for that?" And they go, "Yeah, I've got minor illusion, but it only does this, this, and this." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll offer you this." So like that's one of my favorite things to go is like, I will offer you that in this case, minor illusion can do this, but it's going to cost you an exhaustion or something like that. Or it's going to
Mhm.
cost you 2 slots. Or it's, like, we'll bargain. And I'll say, I would rather you try to do that cool thing and it's just going to cost you a little something more rather than be like, nope, can't do it, you know?
Mhm.
So, that's another thing that I think with time and experience, you begin to go, you begin to feel less, beholden to, like, the literal. And my feeling is as long as the agreement between your players and you is mutual, as long as they agree to those terms, then, hey, run with it.
You're off to the races.
Yeah,
S I think you've covered a lot of this, but, what would you recommend for someone who is considering,
right.
stepping behind the screen for the first time?
Yeah, well, like I said, play into your own strengths and play into your own interests. That was another thing. I'm not a big fantasy person. Like I don't come from Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or even Dungeons and Dragons very much. I like fairy tales and I like adventure stories. I'm high adventure, like low fantasy. In fact, my current obsession is human commoners. I'm really interested in playing D&D with human commoners and again, letting the I get like, I like players more than I like characters sometimes. So I really want my players to feel like they're shining and the vehicle by which they're shining is their character rather than my character with the amazing big backstory and the fancy spells they can do. It's you, right? You're amazing, and your amazingness is being funneled through this character, and that's the actor in me because that's, for me, what acting is. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's leading into as a dungeon master, what do you love? Do you love, manga? Do you love, Pokemon? Do you love like what are the things? Do you like haunted houses? Do you like, you know, y- underwater? Like what are the things that make your heart kind of go, whew, I'm so excited to tell this story? Because then you're gonna need less notes. You're gonna be able to improvise that on the spot much more easily because it's yours. And so that's always my recommendation to beginning dungeon masters is think about what you love, think about what you're naturally good at and run that game. And again, you might not be right for every single player, but you will run the best game that you're capable of rather than like a not so good version of someone else's.
I love that. I also to pick up on I love what you said about drawing on it, thinking of it as an actor in terms of wanting the players to
Yeah.
shine. And I do think that like well, I try not to get sidetracked. Like there are things to do with training and technique as actors that are, some people are really going to enjoy leaning into and some aren't in
Mhm.
terms of like, I have studied speech patterns and mannerisms. That's going to
Right,
be for
right,
some
right, right,
people
right.
and some not. But I think there's a basic core that if you've spent a lot of time performing you'll recognize jargon like connecting to a character and things like that. But in practice, what it
Mhm.
sort of means is the way people come alive, the way people
Mhm.
kind of shine from the inside and get excited when they
Yeah.
understand what's happening and why they're doing it. And it just sort of elevates the fun for everyone. And I think
Yeah.
that's something clearly you are able to draw out of people as a DM.
I hope so. I mean, the and again, I'm coming from theater and film can be different, but there's a reason we do Romeo and Juliet over and over and over again. It's because each new actor who steps into one of those roles f- fills it, floods it with themselves, right? It's not if there was one perfect way to play Juliet, someone would have done it and we would have been done by now. But it's
Check.
because yeah, it's because we as people are always bigger than character. We are always more complex and more interesting than anything you could write on a piece of paper simply because we've lived. And so there are definitely some people who are more transformative and like to do voices and fall in there. And there's, none of this is one on top of the other. But in the end, it has to be you filling that space. And so, whichever kind of actor you are, I think we are all searching for that perfect presence filled with experience. And some people get to that from the outside, and some people get from that from the inside or the bottom or the top or around the back, so we have different ways
And
of
in the
getting
end,
there, but that's it.
because they're
Yeah.
your decisions, you all really actually did that together,
Yeah,
which is pretty
exactly.
cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's get into some of the more detailed questions I've got for you because you are a fantastic DM and you
Thank
specialize
you.
in something that I am fascinated by because you make amazing puzzles and
Thank you.
props. Now, you spoke to this a little bit in terms of the why, you just like it, but
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
always know this was going to be your thing, or was there a moment of like, oh, this part will
I
be
th
fun?
I think I always knew. Um, so I've said this in almost every D&D interview I've ever given. I'm gonna say it again. Go to Her Interactive and buy the Nancy Drew computer games. They're incredible. The stories are so rich. You learn that's another thing. I'm a smarty pants, so I like learning while I play or while I do things. So you learn things, and they're filled with this
Very much.
incredible are we cut from the same
You're
cloth? Is
speaking my
that
language, yes.
okay, good.
You're
Go
this is
play
a
Nancy
comfortable
Drew games.
space for wanting to learn things.
So I to you specifically, I recommend go play the Nancy Drew games. Um, they're just they're really wonderfully done and they put a lot of effort into them. I like the 3 I recommend would be Ghost of Thornton Hall, um, ooh, Shadow at Water's Edge. Third good one. Maybe what's the one in Greece? Um, anyways, they're all it might be Shattered Medallion or that might be New Zealand. I don't know. Anyways, they're all wonderful. The most recent one is a new kind of company, so I don't not the most recent one, but any of the sort of like, those ones are all fantastic. And again, their puzzles are incredible. And the great thing about puzzles is that like D&D, there are only a few basic mechanics, right? Let's say there's a dozen basic puzzle mechanics. And then you can dress those up however you want. So and you can layer them, right? So you could have a cryptex puzzle, but then you're going to put another layer on top of it where it's not numbers, it's now a cipher alphabet and they're letters. And then you're going to go even further and you're going to say that you're going to use, Morse code for those letters, which you then translate into numbers, which then you have to find the right combination based on a riddle. And so in a way, I don't have to come up with puzzles. I just steal a puzzle from Nancy Drew and and redress it, right? Because there's no copyright on, a cipher. Um, but the way that they dress it is what makes it fit for their world. So I dress it for what fits for my world. Um, and that's really, I think, the big key to puzzles, to not being intimidated by making puzzles. It's okay to do research. It's okay to, again, look up ciphers. There are these incredible books you can find all about different ciphers and things like that. And I also really like, because I'm enjoy learning, I always insert into my games an opportunity for them to find a book on ciphers or to find a letter that teaches you how to do Morse code so that when you find the puzzle, you're like, oh my God, it's Morse code. We can translate this. Um, so I don't want to just say, okay, make an intelligence check. All right, you can read Morse code. I want to give you all of the tools that you as a player need to translate Morse code. And you don't even have to be good at puzzles because I'm going to tell you how to do it. You're just going to have the fun of figuring it out. And that to me is, I think, also a really important thing is you don't ever want puzzles are not about making your players feel stupid. It should be the
Mm,
opposite. It should be
mhm.
giving players an opportunity to feel really smart. Um, so you don't want them
I
to
love
be so opaque that there's no way to get it. I always have like layers upon layers upon layers of hints and clues, and sometimes they don't find them all. Or I often will offer like investigation checks or intelligence checks for a hint, and depending on
mhm.
how high you always get a hint, but the higher the hint, the better the hint. The higher the roll, the better the hint, kind of thing. Because I want people to feel like they figured it out. If they got a little bit of help, there's no shame in that.
I love this. My next question was gonna be how do you decide how hard a puzzle is? Figure that out. And
Right.
it sounds like part of the
Right.
answer is make sure that you've layered some hints in there so that
Yes.
wherever it lands, you've got some backup plans. But
Yes, I layer that in. Generally, I try to keep puzzles relatively straightforward unless I know I'm playing with a group that loves them. If I know I'm playing with a group that loves them, I'll layer a couple of different, I'll layer a cipher on top of a mechanical on top of a, something like that. Um, but generally it's a one or two step process. Or I might have it be that like you get the code by solving a riddle, but the riddle is, has gone through an alphabet cipher or something like that. And then I'll teach you how to do an alphabet cipher. So you know the steps. It's just you get to sit down with a piece of paper and be like, okay, and this goes here and this goes, oh my God, that's a word. That's what I want to see. I want to see people go, you know.
aw. What makes for a good puzzle?
Good
What does that
puzzle.
mean?
Uh um this is a Montessori principle. I told you I was a nerdy smarty pants. Um, Inherent reward. So the idea of like Montessori is the idea of like a circular puzzle piece that slides right in, and the reward is it fits, right? So you don't need someone to go, "Yay, you did it." You're like, "Ooh, that was very pleasurable that that slid in and fit in that space." And so for puzzles, I think an inherent reward is the best kind of puzzle to make. So, first of all, your puzzle should be hiding something really cool, right? Like, or if it
Ranger
hides
Ovaltine.
nothing, because if I've done it where it hides nothing except a note from someone who says, "Haha, I got here first." Like, it should be something really like, "Ah," or "Ah," it should be the best or the worst. It shouldn't just be the door to get in, to the house, it should really be worth it to go through it. And then specifically with physical puzzles, you do want something where, like, if it actually, like, fits together or it actually turns and then comes apart, that's all very exciting. And even if you're doing that imaginatively, describe those steps. If I had someone solving a cipher and I didn't actually have, not a cipher, a cryptex, and I didn't actually have a physical cryptex for them to use, or it was over line, I would still say, you spin each dial, finding the correct symbol. As you begin to pull it apart, you feel the pressure release as you open it and a small vial falls out. Like, you want to really sell the inherent reward of opening something.
The sensory elements of it. That
Yeah,
see, I'm
yeah.
already invested. I'm not even in this platinum. I'm like,
I know.
I did do that.
I did. I
Um,
opened the cryptex. You said so.
but you do take it to another level because you will sometimes show up at a game with an actual thing for someone to
Yes.
decipher, which is
Yes.
incredible. What are your
Thank
tips for
you.
folks who would like to try bringing some props to the table?
Yeah, again, it should be in your interest wheelhouse already. This should be fun, not a chore. So don't do this if this is not your jam. But I already owned an X-Acto knife, and I already had foam boards, so I was very ready for it. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it can be a really exciting thing, and I think players always respond when they're like, "You made this for us," like there's a feeling of that. And I particularly like when things look a little homemade, look a little bit like, you know, you did them yourself. Um, so actually I brought some examples to show you all. So this is my cryptex that I created. This I found on like eHow or something like that, how to make a cryptex with cardstock. So it's cardstock and glue. That's all. And I did all these symbols and numbers and things, and each of these spin. And when you get them in line, it comes apart. Now, do I remember what the code is for this? Is one of the questions. I might not. I can cheat though. Let's see.
Can
How
the
could I
puzzle maker
cheat?
make a puzzle so good even the puzzle maker can't solve it? We're about to find out
Well,
live on
I know
stream.
I need my notes, but here's how to break to cheat your way through a cryptex that was homemade. I'll figure it out later, but yes, I brought that. So yeah, I mean this is really fun. And then, when players finally slide it open and I can hide something small in here like a little vial or a little rolled up note or something like that. Um so yeah, notes too. You can do so much now, especially if it's not a streamed for or paid for game. Steal stuff from the internet, like who cares? Because you're not making any money off of it. It's just to have fun at home. So, a lot of things are just like if you just throw like a fancy border on a piece of parchment paper and type it too. Like I don't have great handwriting, but like there are calligraphy fonts on basic word processors, and you can really make something that looks kind of great. And um I've done the whole thing where I've burnt the edges of paper and I've soaked it in tea and I've crumpled it up, and you can make stuff look really, you know, I've done I did research on forging techniques, not because I wanted to forge anything, but forging techniques require sometimes aging things or making things look that
You
way.
must be on some
And so
very fun watch lists
I
at this
I'm
point.
sure that I
Uh,
am. I'm sure that I am. Um, and
Counterfeiting
then so I have another
currency.
one. I know. This is a less, fancy one I did. I'm gonna maybe try to redo this one with cardstock because I think it would be better, but these are, they're plates that have different holes in them, and they come apart and they only go back together in a certain order. And you can see like some of them have pegs on them. Go, they come all the way down.
I love this.
And so I made this in my father's in the basement of our house in Brooklyn. Um, this is a hard puzzle. I gave this to my team who I knew like thrived on puzzles. And I basically they had to find each piece of them in a different room of this mansion that they were exploring. So that took us forever just to get all the pieces. And then once they did, I put them all on the table and I was like, I'm going to go get a drink. I'll see you in like 30 minutes. Let me know how far you got. But it was amazing to be like sitting there at the table and just watching them be like, oh, this one. Oh, no, no. Wait, it should be this one. And they're all like working together to try and build this thing up. And again, I would only do that with a team that I knew loved that and would really thrive on it, because for other people you get half the people sitting back and they're like, this isn't for me. And see, again, you want to read your table really well, and maybe for a team like that I do just four, like maybe you make just four pieces because that's a lot easier to throw together. um but yeah, I get a lot of satisfaction watching people use their brains. I think it's fascinating to watch people think, and puzzles can do that. D&D in general can do that. Um, but it's exciting to watch people think, and it's exciting to watch people succeed at something hard like that and then be so proud of themselves. I don't know, I get a real kick out of that. So, so
That's
that's why
an
I will
amazing
happily spend hours with an X-Acto knife and cardstock because it excites me.
And that's beautiful. I love that you mentioned reading the table because
Yeah,
some of us have been in situations where like, 3 players at the table are really into the puzzle and wanna sit
yeah,
here till we get it, and 2 players really want to move on and do something
yeah,
else. How do you approach when you're in a situation like that and you've already set it out in front of them and it's just sort of now arising? Have you had
right.
any successful experiences in
I have.
carrying that forward?
Yes, I have. So if it looks like one or two people are going to dominate the puzzle and then the others are not as interested, um, you know, I, I will oftentimes not side quest, that's too big of a word. But if I see that happening, I might sit there and go, three of you hear a creak from outside the door. So, while they're working on the puzzle, they have a little something to go and investigate. Um, you know, I I'm deciding more and more that old adage of like don't split the party. I kind of hate it because it's a little meta gamey, right? It's a little like we're sticking together so that we do not die. When like if two people were working on a puzzle and the rest of you heard a noise, like the three of you might go, you might do it. So I might start encouraging my players. I might, again, it's about like safety, right? So I might say, look, I am never going to TPK you for making a great creative decision, right? Like you are always safe. So feel free if you feel like this is a moment in which splitting the party will allow you to get two things done at once. Like don't feel beholden to that adage. Because maybe we have a really fantastic, you know, story going on here, which we go like, pause, story over here. Okay, pause, back to you, Like some of my favorite moments have been things like that, where like someone goes on their own like scouting quest through. I mean, it's just the two of us, and everyone else at the table's like, oh, I hope they don't die, and it's lovely that tension. But we had one of those on Relics and Rarities in the fourth episode. I know Janina is a puzzle fiend. So I specifically invited her to come do that fourth episode because it was my most puzzly of the night. And there were definitely a number of times, if you watch that episode, where she's like, got it, that's it, kind of thing. And that was fine because that was built for her. And the other players explored or did investigation checks or kind of kept the story going while she took that time. And the very last encounter of that adventure, again, was tailor made for that. It was a puzzle while there was an ongoing battle so that there's a time limit, right? You have to solve it fast. And it was an easy puzzle to the event that you knew exactly what you had to do. You just had to do it pretty quickly. And of course, I physically had them coloring things in. And the most amazing thing happened, which is that Mume, who's a rogue melee fighter, our fighter, ended up doing the puzzle while the bard and the druid and the barbarian fought off the zombies. And I mean, the idea of this druid like just being like vines, 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 while their two tanks are over here like, oh, trying to figure the puzzle was again why I'm just like, you have to play this more from your player, your brain, rather than always your character sheet. Your character sheet would say that was a terrible idea. But the end of that adventure is so compelling because they did the opposite. And we had little Rick Emma spoil. If you haven't watched it, please go watch Relics and Rarities, everybody. I'm so effing proud of it. Um, but we have
It's
little
wonderful.
Ricky. Thank you. We have little Ricky like taking hits for the barbarian to like save them, and it's very exciting, and I'm so glad that he got that moment that he might not have had if our fighter and our rogue were more like, "No, we should be the ones," you know? So again,
Mhm.
following your gut and your instinct and not letting that kind of game mentality totally take over, what the story is. I don't know if I
I
answered your question.
love
I went totally off on a
No,
tangent, but I love it.
and it's a perfect example of sort of you're thinking in terms of strategy and precision to create these puzzles, but then letting the actual play experience lead
Yeah.
in play, and that it doesn't have to all be about optimizing. Although, like, what I
Yeah.
love is that sometimes folks who really enjoy optimizing will often do
Mhm.
that because they want to have interesting ways of dealing with problems. And I feel like you
Sure.
build that into your combats by making them tricky in a lot of other ways.
Yeah, yeah,
I feel
I want there to be multiple solutions, multiple problems, um, and I also want, like I don't like, a lot of times when I play games, people are always like, "Is this character okay? Will this fit in your world?" And I'm kind of like, "Yeah, build whatever you want." Like, I don't build worlds that are, like, specific, "You have to be this," or da necessarily, I kinda and then I'm kind of like, "You're in charge. I don't wanna memorize your spells. Like, you tell me how your spell works," you know? And if you get it wrong, that's okay. I get stuff wrong all the time. Like, so I really try to let gameplay be in their hands. I'm just there to say, "Oh, okay, sure, let's try that." Um, so I don't necessarily go, "This would be a good this would be a good opportunity for Mume, Janina's character, to shine." I go, "This would be a good opportunity for Janina to shine if she wants it."
Mm.
But she also can choose to fight, and that's fine as well. Um, but yeah, again, I end up being more fascinated by players than I do by characters, and that's just a personal thing. That is not a mandate of D&D. That is just a Deborah thinks you are way cooler.
So what is something that you've never gotten to try, that you'd love to take on in
Ooh.
terms of puzzles or prop creation?
Ooh, in terms of puzzles and prop creation. Hmm. I mean, I do like I said, I do love really, like, mechanical, like, actual things people can put their hands on, and I've done some of the smaller scale stuff. I have I have often thought about doing that, like, D&D escape room crossover kinda thing, where, like, again, once we get back to the point where we can actually all hang out together, that, like, I preset the room to have a bunch of puzzles in it that are a little bit hidden from view, and then, like, 15 minutes into the game, I suddenly kind of like lights, reveal that we have actual locks and actual cabinets with things in it, and you have to actually go through the books and do all the things. So that's sort of a larger scale. I had a big planned out one for Halloween once. I was going to do like a haunted house escape room D&D thing, but I did not have time to do that. So I'll probably spend years of my life planning it and making it and finally doing it when I'm like 50 years old or something.
That's a goal worth waiting for, and something I'm pretty sure that it will be possible to hang out in real spaces by that time. So I feel like that
Probably by
timeline is going to
then,
work out
yes.
fine. I do wonder. I This is just random, but in reading, as a lot of folks did, and you being a theater person, about the passing
Mhm.
of Stephen Sondheim last fall, I had not
Yeah.
realized that in addition to being an incredible musical theater genius and the creator of
Mhm.
incredibly clever lyrics, he also loved adventure games and escape rooms. And
I
I'm now
didn't know
wondering what
that.
the brain through line is that connects all of the
Yeah.
sort of all of the fun that you can have with those sorts of ideas. But I submit,
I
uh
the question to me? I mean, look, I was a math and science geek. That was my thing growing up. I was very into data and, getting like algebra was fascinating to me because it's this big string of confusing numbers and letters that you slowly come down to like x equals and then there's this beautiful simplicity about it. So I loved that, and I think musicians often have math type brains, really good musicians and even really good lyricists because it's some of it is the craft of it requires, I think, that kind of thinking. I don't know if Sondheim was or not, but he's clearly a genius. And I think puzzles and escape rooms and things like that ask that same part of your brain to kind of come alive. And as a theater geek, the combination of those two, either in D&D or escape room type situations or Nancy Drew computer games, is sort of perfect. And I imagine for a composer and lyricist like Sondheim, again, it's that bringing together those disparate parts. That's what feel like disparate parts. The storytelling
mm,
artistic part and the mathy solving puzzles part, really, I think, come together in music, adventure games. There's a few places where that happens.
and I guess rhyme is probably a pretty good example of inherent reward. Nobody
I
needs
think
to be there to
so.
hear it, but you're like, "Well, that fit."
100%. You are absolutely right. Right on.
So, for folks who might be following along or just happen to cross the stream or know you from some of your other work,
Mhm.
why should people try out Dungeons& and Dragons if they never have?
Because you're missing out. Um, because I was very sad at 25 to discover everything I'd missed. I think playing as a kid would have been really special and exciting, and I regret a little bit that I didn't get to do that. But it was also a different time. I think when D&D when I was young still felt like kind of an exclusive club, kind of like you had to know the password before you could play. Um, so, it was what it was. But it's I think with the right dungeon master, or at least the right attitude about it, it's really not a very difficult space. We all did it naturally. I mean, when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, just making up stories, we were playing D&D without a rule book. It's the same thing. That's how I feel when I play. I feel like a 12-year-old again, just making stories up and, putting on my fluffy skirts and dancing around in my room. That's the feeling that I get from it. So we all know how to do it already. You already know how to play D&D. It's just, again, it's that confidence and having someone at the helm who's willing to do a little bit of research. Um, but again, I would say start with like the very, very basic rules. Make up your own 5-room dungeon, and a 5-room dungeon can be anything. It can be a castle, it can be the side of a cliff, it can be a forest, it can be whatever you want, but 5 sort of challenges of different kinds, and run your friends through it, and anytime you come up on a rule you don't know, just say, "What about this? Would you feel like and even if it's not something you or I would do, if it's like, "What if I just took 3 hit points and let you cast that spell?" Who cares, right? You just do it because you want the story moment to be fun and you want everyone to feel like they're contributing from their imaginations. So, yeah, you everyone should give it a shot. I'm a big champion. I'm always willing if I know you and you haven't played and you have even the slightest bit of interest, I always offer it up. I'm always like, "I will run a very basic 2-hour, 3-hour beginning campaign for you just to see what this is." Because a lot of people I think don't even really know what D&D is, and I wanna at least give them that flavor of what it is.
I love that. You've alluded in the past that sort of, once you finally found some folks to play with, you
Mhm,
were like, and then it changed my life. And
mhm.
now it's sort of like, how did it change your life?
Oh, boy. Uh, 1, friendships. So, people who I struggle to make friends and be social in the more traditional ways, like going to bars or parties or even just having dinners, I kind of need an activity or a topic. Like this is, I could talk about like a specific thing that I love for hours. Like if it's acting or Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, I have no problem talking. But just the like general, oh, well, what do you do and how are you? I just find myself second guessing and feeling so self conscious every single second. But if I have an activity, like if we're bowling, I can talk to you about your job, or if we're playing D&D, I I just feel like I learn so much about who people are through play. Board
Mhm.
games as well is a big piece of that. So I
No one can hide who
it's
they are in a
one.
board game.
Yeah, in a way. And so I've many of my closest friends I've made through playing RPGs, and board games. And maintain those friendships through that, that kind of like, oh, monthly get together. Like I know I'm going to see them once a month or however that, works. So that's been valuable. Also quite literally like the career opportunities. I mean, it hasn't, exploded my acting career, but I have this whole second life, in a way that when there's because acting is one of those kind of this kind of career where like sometimes you're doing a lot and sometimes you're not doing very much. And then, oh my God, suddenly you're doing more. Um, and so to be able, when I'm in these places, to one, make some money, and two, be creatively active, is an incredible gift. So that's been really spectacular. And now, looking potentially towards publishing, looking towards running games on a more regular basis. Um, it's become more than sort of a side gig. It's sort of a second career. So yeah, I mean, quite literally changed my life in that way. I mean, I wouldn't be here talking to you. That's for sure.
Well, I very much appreciated that this is why I've gotten to meet and know you a little bit over time on these things. But I also love that
Yeah.
anyone who's watched Relics and Rarities can see that that is a game that specifically only you would run in exactly the way you do it,
Right.
or could run
Yes.
in exactly the way you do it. Much as I would love
Yes.
to do, like, and maybe will at some point in my home games do my
Yeah,
own
you
knockoff
should.
Relics and Rarities.
Yeah.
It's
Do it,
it
do it,
is
knock off. I told you
beautiful.
stealing is fine as long as you're not, like, making money off of it. Steal, 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 yeah.
Play with it at your table, because that's the other beautiful thing
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
D&D books exist as they are, but we always talk about how the game comes to life in its final form at your table,
yeah,
and you are a
yeah,
key participant and shaper of that, and that's why every game is different, even though it's all
yeah,
D&D.
yeah, and
So,
again, I
we
mean,
have
full
some.
full credit to the writers and everybody for building
Yeah,
D&D that way, right? Like, this isn't to say, like, "Oh, their stuff wasn't good enough." It's the opposite. Their stuff is so amazing that I can
they
make
make this
anything
possible.
with it. How did they do that? Incredible. Sorry, go ahead.
I keep trying to get them to completely answer how do they do that, but they're still keeping some of their secrets. Give us time. We will
They
get
should,
all of
they
the
should,
secrets.
they
Um,
should, yeah.
we, speaking of which, have some amazing questions coming in from chat,
Yay.
that I have been hoarding from our time as they come in. Great question from Aaron Lore. Do you
Mhm.
find props good for people with ADHD or the like, or do you find them to be
Oh.
bad for them?
Again, I think it depends on the person. Like that's a unique question for each individual.
Hmm.
I've played with a lot of different people, in different places in their experiences. And again, that's why I think it's always good to have those side opportunities, because some
Hmm.
people love it, right? Some people see something like that that they can get their hands on, and that's how they learn. I'm very interested in like learning differences, and that we are all capable of, not even capable, we are all deeply intelligent human beings, but our systems in our country are not, in our world, are not necessarily set up to cater or to support all of those different ways that we learn. So what's really wonderful about D&D is that I think you can start to kind of, it's a problem solving game that allows you to solve the problem any way that actually suits you. And it allows me to say yes to ideas that for some people they're so used to being heard no, be
Hmm.
quiet or do it this way, don't do it that way. I love sitting at a D&D table, and for someone like that who's been told no in their more traditional spaces, to be able to say yes, let's do it that way. right? Like, absolutely. I had one player, he they found a cottage filled with spiders, and he wanted to collect a jar of spiders, and I said, "Oh, okay, great. Yeah, absolutely." Little animal handling check, and he collected a bunch of spiders, right? And then for the rest of the game, he wanted to slingshot spiders at his opponents. And even though, like, he was a barbarian, like, even, like, throwing his javelin would have done tons of more damage, he really wanted to do that. And he was having so much fun doing it that I was like, "Please." And I even gave him I was like, "You don't get, like, bludgeoning damage from it, but it'll bite him. It's so added like, I'm gonna give you poison when it hits his cheek." And that kid was so excited to do that, and I was so happy to be able to facilitate that and say yes to that. So I think similarly with physical props, there are some people who need that. Like, if you could give them physical props in school or at work, that would directly work with their way of learning. And then there are some people that it doesn't. And in that case, I have the noise outside the door that they can go investigate. Um, so, it's having those options.
I love that. Let's see. So you've kind of answered this from a cup of squids, which was the cup of squids
Uh-huh.
said there's a lot of debate about whether the puzzle should be designed to test the players versus the characters, which you
Mm.
prefer, and if it's a mix of both, how do you balance the two? And you sort of
Mhm.
said you make them all solvable inside the world to kind of avoid that
Yes.
element, right?
They're
Mhm.
solvable inside the world. Like I said, I give investigation checks for hints. The only thing I'm trying to avoid is there's a door with a puzzle on it. You rolled a 20 on investigation. You get the door open. I'm just trying to avoid the kind of bypassing of the story moment.
Mhm.
So either I have a player who loves puzzles and whose character is good at puzzles, um, and they wanna do that. Now, some people are very, very smart puzzlers who then play characters who are not, and I love seeing them figure out ways using their character to help. I mean, again, watch Relics and Rarities. Jasmine as Beryl is a pro at this because Jasmine is a very high intelligence person who then played a much more wisdom-based, character, and you can really watch her expertly be like, "Oh, have we looked at the fireplace?" Kind of thing, and, or she just goes, "Oh, I go and I start, tapping on the fireplace. Oh, this is funny," and then everyone else goes and checks it out. So one, I think players can step up in that way and find their ways around it, and if you are not a puzzle person but your character has a really high investigation, is really good at puzzles, that's what those investigation checks are for. So I will
Mhm.
give you infinite hints. I will essentially, if you want me to, I can tell you how to solve the puzzle and you just have to do it. So that's why I have sort of this sliding scale so that in the moment, the players can let me know how much help they want.
Mhm. Perfect. Drunkle Vlad asks, "How do you deal with?" I guess this is really off the wall player ideas, but in this case, like, I want to disarm this enemy, so I'm going to try to cut the arm off, or I try to
Uh huh.
smash my axe into their spear to break, so they can't reach behind
Uh huh.
me.
Uh huh.
Just
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have a called shot home rule. So my called shot home rule is again mostly for flavor, but if it works, I might reward you with a condition or something like that. So my called shot rule is that on your turn, you use your action to call your shot. You then use your reaction immediately after the opponent takes their action. So you have to essentially let them go first as your penalty. Also, certain parts of the body have cover. So arms and legs are going to be a +2 to that creature's AC, and head and groin are going to be a +5. So you can call the shot. You can say, I want to try and blind them by shooting my arrow directly into their eye. I'll go, okay, you have to wait, use your reaction after their turn. So you can't use op of attack. You can't, and they might move out of your range or they might kill you before you get the chance. And you're going for the head. So it's a +5 to their AC. But if you do it, okay, you've blinded them on the one side, and, we're gonna make a big meal of all the goo, spurting out and doing all that fun. So I think for flavor reasons, and I want you to be able to stab someone's foot into the ground and restrain them, right? Like they can't move unless they take an action to release themselves. So if you can sell me on a good story point, I will mechanically figure it out. I do really like the idea of calling shots to make battles more strategic and story based, because sometimes
Mm,
battles can become just hit point trackers, right? I hit, you lose 5 points. You hit, I lose 7. You hit, I lose 15, and that can lose some of its flavor if you're just kind of doing that over and over again. So I encourage players to have creative ideas like that and reward them for it, I hope.
I love that with the sort of same bargaining sense that you were
Yeah.
describing earlier.
Yeah. I will
Hmm.
offer, you can do that if you give me this. If you risk this, if you risk it, you can take that shot, which I think is cool.
Ooh, I love this from Jester for Coffee. If you have one, what's your favorite prop that's been used in one of your games? But is there one where how different was its use to that which you'd expected or intended? Have you ever had a left turn with the prop?
Yeah. Okay. So it's not my favorite prop. I have a lot of favorite props. I mean, frankly, this might be one of my favorite props. I'm very, very proud of it. Um, I mean, it has a piece of, a place of respect on my table over there. Um, but so this is another Janina one. Janina's my she's a big puzzler in my home games, and so I end up making a lot of things for her with her in mind. Um, so I made a bookcase. Pretty classic idea. You have to pull the right books in order to, in the right sequence in order to open the door behind the bookcase. And there was a whole riddle that went with it that helped you figure out which books were the right books. And it had to do with like repetitions of letters and then putting those in alphabetical order in order to know which order to pull the books that had the repetitious letters. It was, again, a multi layered thing because I knew it was Janina. But then she surprised me. And I guess either she didn't want to solve it or whatever it was. She said, I'm going to go to the kitchen. Is there flour in the kitchen? I'm like, I mean, yeah, it's a well-stocked kitchen. There's flour in the kitchen. She goes, "Okay, I take some. I blow it all over the books looking for fingerprints." I was like, "That is
Mhm.
so genius. I have to let that work, right?" Like, I can't tell her, "No, I made a puzzle and you have to solve it," So I was like, "Yeah, I mean, the flour sticks to these 6 books more intensely than it does to the other ones." And then it was just she was like, "Okay, as long as we're not in any danger, I wanna spend an hour, like, meticulously going through the different things." And I didn't make her do that, that would have been ridiculous. But I said, "If you're willing to risk" again, bargaining, "I will offer if you're willing to take an hour and if anything happens in that hour, that's what happens. You can just try them all. And by the end of the hour, you'll have found it." And that was the bargain we made. And we did have a little side adventure where Janina couldn't participate because she was trying books. And so she had to kind of, wait, and everyone else sort of fought off the kobolds or whatever were coming, um, and they ended up making it through just in time and slamming the bookcase closed behind them, and it added to a really lovely story moment that, again, I couldn't have predicted and wouldn't have happened if I'd, forced them to go through the process of solving my puzzle. So you can't be too precious about it.
I love that. And then, as you said at the beginning, now you can reuse the whole book
Oh
spine
yeah,
contents puzzle
oh
anywhere you
yeah.
want.
Oh, I'm gonna. It took a long time to come up with, but yeah, I mean, it's all ready to go.
Oh, that's brilliant. Let's see. Ooh, another good one from Drunkle Vlad. Puzzle wise, how often do you just
Mhm.
look at children's puzzles that should be easy and just see the party like way overthinking it?
Yes, that does happen. Um, I mean, it's not necessarily that they're so easy. It's more that like people are too smart, right? They see things in it very, deeper necessarily than you were intending. There's two ways I might handle that. If it can work, if the thing that they've spotted actually does fit in, great. I was that brilliant. I came up with that. You solved it. You're incredible. Proceed through the door, my friends. So I can reward it if it actually does work. If it doesn't work and it's just going to send them off on a wild goose chase, I might pick like the person who most recently was on the right track. And I might out of the blue just say, make a wisdom check, or a perception check just to that person, you know. And if they do it and they roll decently well, and frankly, even if they didn't roll so well, I'm doing this as a way to offer a sense, a redirection. I say, you remember, something it really struck you when you came up with the idea that you think maybe this is 2 words. You think maybe it's 2 words and not one long word, and that just sticks with you for some reason, and that just allows people to go, "Oh, I guess we've kind of let's redirect back to that pivot moment." Um, and
Again, no
that way,
spoilers,
again,
but you do this a bit in episode 1 of
yeah.
Relics Rarities, I think,
Did I? Yeah,
at a
okay,
at a
there you go.
certain point. Um, in I wanna say the nursery, there was sort of a, like,
Okay.
"You've remembered this," but it's
Yes.
you almost wouldn't notice it
Oh,
happening, you know?
I remember that, yes, because, yes, they had everything that they needed. It was all right in front of them, and it was just one of those moments where I was like, "Oh my god, they're so close, and they're talking in circles around this other bit." So, yeah, it's just a way to be like, "Ricky, there's something about this moment, you just can't stop thinking about it." Because we have those moments, right? We have those moments in life where we're like, "Oh, the last time I felt good about this, train of thought was this point. I'm gonna go back to that and try see if there's anything else." So it feels true to story and true to life, and it's a way to sort of
Yeah.
gently nudge people back in the right direction so we don't spend too much time. Now at a home game, I don't know, maybe if they were having fun, I'd let them keep going. But obviously for stream,
But I
we
could
have different, purposes.
and I can testify as a viewer that it felt perfectly natural, and it still felt
Good.
completely like they solved that puzzle when you got through, because
Good.
you were just like, "Look over there," and they were like, "Oh, wait, we have new ideas," that all came from them. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
And
idea.
see if Xander's mad at me later for calling this out, but, Denishap has a great question. What stream games or other projects do you have on the horizon that we could watch out for?
I do have things that I'm not allowed to talk about. But keep your eyes and ears peeled. Um, Probably pretty soon we'll be able to mention it. I mean, I can say this, I've been running, private games. They're called Cardinal Adventures. They're 4 one shots, but they string together in a one single story. So you can jump in and play 1 or you can play all 4. We're done with that, or I mean, I'm still finishing up games, but there's no more, uh, slots available. But it's been a really wonderful experience, especially as a dungeon master, to run, like, 4 one shots 15 times, to really I mean, I've never play tested something so vigorously. Um, and I have, 8 more adventures in that Cardinal Adventures lineup that I would love to do someday. Again, trying to figure out if that's, again, more private games, if that's a streamed game, if that's publishing a campaign, I'm not sure. But that's been really fun, and definitely I wanna do something more with Cardinal, so keep an eye out for Cardinal, but might be a few years, I don't know.
Excellent. Look, RPG
Yeah.
fans, we're very impatient, but we're also very patient. We
You
still talk about things
understand,
as
yeah.
recent that happened literally 15 years ago. This,
Yeah, we all understand that this stuff takes time, and that, in the end, you will have it all, and you will get to enjoy it.
well, thank you so much. I love the old librarian says Relics and Rarities was a heavy influence on my group's first
Oh.
IRL game post COVID, and many
Oh, that's
many
so
belated birthday wishes all coming in from chat
oh,
for you today.
thank
Um,
you. Thank you so
and
much.
our final question, do you have this is a very important D&D Beyond question that
Okay,
it is mandatory,
okay,
we have to have on the record.
okay.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur?
I have a favorite dinosaur? Oh my god, I feel like I'm 5. Um, Gosh. I don't remember all my dinosaur names very well, but remember the Land Before Time. Okay, so the Triceratops. I really liked the bossy Triceratops. She was so fun, and I think as a young, possibly bossy girl myself,
Future DM,
I
as we'll
really
put it. Um,
possibly and also, bossy for little girls was a code word for, like, sexism, so,
yeah.
um So
Same page.
but at the time, right, but at the time, I think I was like, "Oh, she gets excited about things and has ideas and that's good." So I really enjoyed her. So maybe Triceratops would be my favorite because of that experience.
I love that so much. Thank you for giving us your time today. This has been such
Of
a
course,
blast.
thank you.
Where can people
I
follow you
enjoyed it.
for more of those
Oh,
hints as the future comes along?
all of the social medias are just my name. So Deborah Ann Woll, no underscores or anything, I don't think. So I'm really pretty easy to find. Um, and yeah, just keep your oh yeah, we've got Truest Blood. So if you were a True Blood fan, listen to the podcast. Another thing I'm like, surprisingly, I didn't know what that was gonna be, and now I'm so proud of it. We really worked hard and it's got this really cool structure that's coming as part of it. I'm writing a lot for it, which I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm so glad I've been writing D&D all these years. I needed the practice. But yeah, that's been a blast. And Kristen, who's my co-host on it, is so funny and yeah, I really am adoring doing it with her. Um, watch Daredevil, watch True Blood, find the films, watch Relics and Rarities, please. And yeah, keep your eyes and ears peeled, and we'll have some new stuff coming up from Deborah Ann Wool universe, I guess. I don't know. Can you say that
Excellent.
about yourself? I can't say that about
Yes,
myself.
100%. Absolutely
Okay.
approved. We are all in
Okay.
line for it now. And thank you so much.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.
We will see you next time on D&D Beyond.
It's D&D.